Welcome to the HEARTS Entwined podcast. In this podcast, we'll be having discussions around the secrets which attract lasting, healthy, fulfilling relationships, creating a healthy mindset, and what women should know and understand about men. Introducing your host, Lyn Smith, the Queen of Hearts, relationship expert, trainer, speaker, and best-selling author of the Cupid's Bow technique. Lyn's mission is to have a positive impact in reducing divorce, domestic violence, and suicide.
Welcome to the HEARTS Entwined podcast. This is your host, Lyn Smith, the Queen of Hearts. And today I've got a really lovely lady all the way from Singapore. Her name is Cristina Gonzales. She's a psychologist who works with adults and couples. So welcome, Christina.
Well, thank you very much, Lyn. It's my pleasure to be here today.
And we're going to be talking today about sort of non-traditional type relationships that are coming to the fore more, that we're seeing in our practices working with couples and adults recently. Both Christina and I have noticed this happening quite a bit, and we wanted to touch on it in this particular episode. So Christina, what's been your experience of what's happening now in terms of how new relationships are being seen and are evolving?
Yeah. Thanks for this. It is true. It feels that more and more, we've noticed this tendency of, people that feel less comfortable with the traditional form of monogamy, and they are like more willing to perhaps open the relationships in different ways, right? Almost like if we consider monogamy as a spectrum, right, where the traditional way of monogamy would be like fully exclusive in many ways, emotionally and sexually, where perhaps the use of pornography or even flirting could be considered as, as breaching the commitment. That would be perhaps in one extreme, and all the way in a scale of grace, right? We could consider less traditional forms of monogamy, to the other extreme, where having different partners in a polyamorous relationship, right, would be, the opposite end of the spectrum. And I guess that for me, love is not almost like one thing that, it has to be like that for everyone. And it's something that may work for a couple may not work for another one. For me, as long as there is a sense of honesty and open communication and trust, and there is a sense of reciprocity where the same rules apply for both partners, right? And that is really key. And almost like bring into the explicit, right, what sometimes we consider implicit, right? And a lot of people come to see me and they're like, he cheated on me or she cheated on me. And then, the other is like really shocked, right? Because like, I really want to know what cheating is. I don't know if I was unfaithful. I don't think that I was. The thing that I did was perhaps texting or sexting with someone or using porn or things that were not considered appropriate, and it were considered cheating for the other partner, right? So a lot of conversations perhaps never happened in a lot of relationships, and we assume, right, that what monogamy is, right? It's like, well, it's more fluid and it's getting more and more fluid with the new technologies where there's access to a lot of content. We've seen this a lot during COVID with all these lockdowns and all of that, right? So I think it's really worth having, the fears up to the explicit and our desires and our dreams up to the explicit, right? In order to understand that, we kind of agree, right? We know what we agree. And in this way is fair for both of, for both of the members of the couple.
Yes, it's so interesting, this topic, because I've seen this evolution happen over mostly recent years, where people are more focused now on it being okay to have multiple partners in relationships and being very open about that. But I'm wondering, I don't know whether you wonder too, Christina, whether it's just a form of people protecting their hearts. You know, they're scared of getting hurt, so they feel like if they have multiple partners, they're less likely to get hurt in any relationship going forward. What's your thoughts around that?
Yeah, it may, right? It may be part of that, right? Like this almost like way to protect yourself, right? Where you're really afraid of commitment, but you really appreciate, right, having some sense of contact with a lot of people, right? I guess that may be one of the presentations, right? I guess that there is, also the option where you really want, and for a lot of people, it's really scary to feel that I am going to be exclusive for the rest of my life, right? Or for a long period of time, right? So I don't know if it's sometimes it may be, an issue with commitment, and sometimes could be like a, life choice that makes more sense for certain people, right? It's definitely not easy, right? I think when, there's one size that fits all, it's easier, right? It's like, okay, it's like, this is what it is. Just, you want the box, buy it, you don't, out of the box, right? At the end of the day, I think life is getting more and more complex. We are living longer, and people may feel that, we go through different phases in life, right? If
Yeah,
you can
absolutely.
do,
I've noticed with, especially, I suppose, those that are sort of in their midlife that have been through previous relationships and maybe had one or even two divorces behind them, they're the ones that are talking to me now about exploring being more polyamorous and having multiple partners. And when I've dug down deep, into why they want to go down that path, and there's no judgment around it, each to their own. But, it does seem like they want to protect themselves from future heartbreak, and they feel this is the way forward for them.
Yes, it could. I mean, those cases, right? It looks like there may be a fear of failure, right? When there is a divorce, there's a deep sense of failure, right? That, just failed, right? And if it happens more than once, right? Of course, it have a very strong impact, right? Even in your, even your self-worth, and, definitely at many different levels, where even people can consider that maybe I'm not, I'm not good for this, I'm not marriage material, or, all this kind of stuff. At the same time, some people are questioning, the institution itself, right? And, it's like, oh, maybe we are not itself monogamous creatures, whatever, works for each one of us, right? I think for me is like really trying to be honest and start talking, right? And be very transparent about that, because what is really hurtful is having very different ideas of what monogamy is. And I've seen a lot of people thinking that cheating is okay only if the guy is the one who's cheating, and that's okay, that's monogamy, right? And of course, it's not expressed like that, but it's in the back of their mind, right? So yes. And that is where I don't think is, and that's what a lot of polyamorous people call this the toxic monogamy, right? Where it's like, actually, you are not practicing monogamy, right? You are saying one thing and acting under different values, right? And different standards for different partners, right? And this is really important to clarify, because a lot of people think that, opening the relationship and becoming polyamorous or having an open relationship means that I have free pass to cheat, right? Well, the reality is that it's going to be like that for both. And the person that you're going to have a relationship out of your main relationship also should know, right, that, that you're practicing this and you have perhaps another relationships. And that may not be great for your partner if the partner is not, practicing the same, right? So, and a lot of the times it's great for you, but if you think about your partner doing the same, maybe it's like, oh, I don't know if I could be willing to do it, right? Sometimes they talk about it, they have very deep conversations, they just even try a little bit and then realize that, oh, it's easier say than that. Than that, right? When you start acting on that, it's just, it's very difficult.
Yeah, and obviously the sort of safe sex side of things needs to be considered as well, you know, from a sexually transmitted diseases scenario that may or may not present itself.
Of course, health, right, is a big thing, right? Transparency and health, and it's really important to know, right? If you slept with someone or not, and use proper protection and all of these kind of things, right? It is very important. It is very difficult as well to deal with jealousy, right? And maybe if you're the one who is having another relationship, maybe it's fine, maybe not, right? But for when it's the other one, jealousy could happen, right? And dealing with this, knowing that, okay, I may get jealous, my partner may get jealous, and that's part of that, and dealing with that with a lot of compassion and a lot of understanding, is really tricky, right?
Absolutely.
Sometimes people blaming each other. Sometimes people blame each other because why we agree on this, and now you're all jealous, right? Well, it probably is going to happen.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's what I've seen, unfortunately, is that, they think it's going to be a good idea. But then the reality is that being humans, we are emotional creatures, and sometimes, emotions creep in, and feelings and affections change once we get involved with somebody else. And I think couples aren't necessarily preparing themselves for that when they have these conversations initially. It might sound exciting, but the reality is totally different, like you mentioned.
I totally agree. And I think this is a very important point, right? People change, emotions change, right? And we are evolving creatures, right? And I like this idea of this evolving commitment, that maybe what worked for us before is not working for us anymore. Maybe I never thought I was gonna feel this way. So it's not that easy, right? So it's like really treating things as, fluid, right? And in these agreements, right, it's really important to understand, right, the human nature, and also the human nature of our emotions, right? That can be extremely complicated, and definitely evolving. That's the key, right? It's going to change, it's going to evolve. And sometimes people have very almost like blurry agreements, and almost like rules where, okay, you can go and do whatever you want as long as you don't fall in love. And it's like, well, it's more perhaps the conversation around what are we going to do if you fall in love, right? Because sometimes could happen,
because we don't know who we're going to have feelings for or fall in love with. We might have good intentions of not getting involved emotionally with other people, but life doesn't necessarily pan out that way, does it?
Absolutely. And it's almost like you're going into the wilderness. You don't know what you're going to encounter, right? It's like, okay, what are we going to do if A, B, C, D, E, F happen, right? Instead of, don't do this, don't do that, don't, feel this way, don't be too grateful, don't be too loving, don't be too kind, right? Of course, there have to be certain rules, but more around, what you do and what information I'm going to have. But putting sometimes like limits to our feelings, right, is almost like an illusion, right? It's like don't feel too much,
isn't it? It's impossible because we don't know. I mean, even somebody who you might not find initially physically attractive could initially be not somebody you feel emotionally connected to. Could, if you carried on connecting with them, become somebody you develop feelings for.
Yeah, absolutely. And understanding that, these things could happen, and what are you going to do in this? And as I said, there's no rules for this, right? It's like, okay, this is what you have to do, but definitely, whatever works for you as a couple, right? But being really okay, both of you, and having conversations. Sometimes it's just it never happened. You just have the conversation and you realize that, oh my God, this is going to be too risky. This is going to be too complicated. And, it feels that, well, it was great to talk about this, right? But sometimes it was more around this idea that, I just wanted to have my cake and eat it too, right? And perhaps after this conversation, what you realize is that, well, maybe you can really do something to improve your erotic connection with your couple, right? With your main partner. And because that may feel safer, right? Rather than going and look somewhere else.
Yeah, absolutely. Because there's lots of ways we can explore spicing up a relationship without going outside of it, looking for connection with others, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes is really thinking about that, right? And as perhaps if it's a trend, right? If it's sometimes as a way to justify something that that you've done, like sometimes I find this idea of opening the relationship as a solution for an infidelity, right? And it's like, well, maybe I feel so guilty and I feel so bad. And maybe it's just, because I cannot be faithful, right? I've cheated so many times. How about opening the relationship, right? And it's like, well, if it's after having an infidelity, open the relationship, I don't think it's a great idea, especially if you do it right away. Because I think, the proper healing and, the proper repair should happen, right? And after that, it may be a possibility, but it may be a possibility also for a couple where, they never cheated on each other, right? So at the end of the day, it's, is an option. Is really difficult to change, right? And evolve, right? From a classic, monogamous relationship to something, that is more fluid, right? Is something that I would recommend doing, very progressively, right? And I mean, it's easy for people who started their relationship like that, right? And they meet as polyamorous, and it's like, okay, that's, how they met. But kind of evolving from one place to the other may be really difficult and, really hurtful. So, yeah. And
I think sometimes there is that imbalance in relationships where I can actually see and feel that one person is on board more than the other, and the other one's just feeling, or should I just go along with it, which is not, doesn't bode well for the future, does it?
Yeah, almost like either as a desperate effort to, retain the partner, right? Or as a desire to please, right? And I think it's so important here, right? To really, really be on board and be okay with that, right? And really listening to your body and is understanding that, is this what I want to do, right? Because, this is going to be a very body experience, right? And our body, encapsulates a lot of wisdom, right? So try to listen to your body and hear, what is it, right? What is it that you really want, right? And because if you're not completely on board, right, as you said, it may be extremely hurtful. And it's not only, it's not only painful, but it may feel like a betrayal to yourself, right?
Yeah, definitely. And the thing I'm seeing is that usually there is one party that's more interested than the other, and I feel that it's more important to discuss the reasons why they want to go outside the relationship, and it might just be because they might have just got into a bit of a rut, and it's just purely about, let's think about things that can happen within the relationship between ourselves that we can do to spice up our intimacy and our sex life, rather than, think it's going to be solved by seeking outside partners.
Yeah, totally. As long as, I mean, I guess that, one of these, things like that happen in sex, that it happen in other aspects of life, right? Is that sometimes it feels that we project a lot of our needs, right, can be met, right, through, just opening the relationship, having sex with certain people. And it may feel that, there are needs that can be met somewhere else, in a different way. a lot of midlife crisis, right? This fear of missing out, right? Have I done enough in my life? Sometimes this is what happens as well. And I get it, right? Because it's almost like the antidote of death is sex, right? So it's like it's like it helps you feel alive and, being seen through the eyes of someone else. So the idea is very appealing, right? And it's very attractive. And it could be the solution, right, for certain people. I'm not saying it won't, but at the same time, we really need to be very careful, right? As you said, are you guys both on board, right? I've seen couples like opening the relationship for a while, and then just, okay, this is not really great, or the agreement was that let's open the relationship, go and sleep with other people for a period of time, right? And it was really helpful as they were talking about their experiences, and it was really interesting for both of them, right? After closing the relationship and they became a classic monogamous relationship, it was really hurtful. It was very painful to go through all of that. And there was, even if there was an agreement, right, there was a massive sense of betrayal. There was, it was really difficult to heal that, right? So sometimes is as well, like the solution is open the relationship, and, because we really like each other, we've known each other for so long, or we have kids, but there's nothing else. There's a lot of, the relationship is broken, or there's a lot of betrayal, and the solution, right, is just perhaps, like trying to fix a bicycle when it's like, well, it looks like, it's not really possible, right? And it just creates more pain, right? So it's really trying to understand the roots, and that's where I think that going, to see a psychologist or to see a counselor, it really helps to, to have these conversations, because these conversations sometimes are very painful and sometimes very difficult to have, right? To really understand, is this something that I want to go through, right? Especially what you said, if you're not fully on board, right? And it's just, maybe this is the solution for this marriage that is going through a rough patch. It may be, or it may be, the last straw, right? A lot of things to take into consideration. Yeah,
absolutely. And perhaps we need to, be educating our youngsters to maybe perceive relationships in a different way, know that, long-term relationships, even though when we enter into marriage, quite often in the vows it says till death us do part, perhaps that needs to be taken out, till death do you part, because sometimes that's just not realistic in today's society, that sometimes you might have multiple long-term relationships in your lifetime, and that's okay. And maybe we ought to set that up as an expectation, rather than you're going to get married and that's it.
Yeah. It's so interesting how young people see relationships, right? And it's, as you said, we really need to be updated, and we really need to understand, okay, how do you guys date, right? Because it was so different for us, right? I guess that one of the things that I see somehow reinforcing, right, that the way that they date, it really reinforces this idea of having multiple partners at the same time, is the dating apps, right? And almost they have normalized this idea of exclusive and non-exclusive. So you kind of choose, right? So you have this option, right? I think in our time, it was more like a linear thing, right? You start seeing each other, and it's clear that if you're seeing each other and you go to the movies, even if you're only kissing, right, you're not going with someone else, right? So it was the assumptions were very different, right? And now it's like, hey, I'm not married, I'm just dating. And it's like they can date multiple partners, right? And a lot of people really enjoy that. And going into marriage, perhaps, and it's like, let's become exclusive, may feel very daunting. right? Like I feel that it's a lack of freedom, or I feel that I really enjoying this. And a lot of people maintain this kind of period of their lives because they feel that they're very free, right? And it's almost like they don't want to go there, right? So that's okay if they don't want, right? So that's part of, you know, what sometimes we need to understand, that this idea of non-monogamous relationships is very normalized for them, right? Since the moment that they start dating. And that's very interesting, right? So at the same time, they haven't gone through the fear that we've gone through in the period of HIV, right? So there's something that sometimes we, feel a little bit almost like responsible, right? To say, hey, are you taking care of yourself? Are you being careful? And that's another, that's almost like another topic, right? But, sometimes I see that a lot of the way to protect themselves from infections is going for regular checkups. And it's like, oh, okay, so they basically don't protect themselves, but they go to regular checkups, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like, okay, that's good to do that, to know if you have something or not, but how is that going to prevent, right? So is is a little bit concerning, to be honest, and we have to really somehow educate people, right? The young people, to be careful with that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think maybe we're heading towards another sort of HIV type epidemic, in that regard, because like you said, dating for youngsters today is very different because they are in that sort of, I suppose, polyamorous phase now these days, where they date multiple partners, maybe not even protecting themselves, and before they decide that they may or may not want to get exclusive with somebody in particular.
Yeah, true. I wonder if it's always like, in, waves, right? It's like it was like the 70s, where it's like, really enjoying the freedom of, your sexuality. And then during the HIV, phase, it's like, oh my God, you have to be very careful. Like there was a lot of fear, of STDs. And now it's like, okay, now back to, more like this sexual freedom, and maybe that's part of that as well, right? Yeah, I guess that we see this idea, right? And for me, what is more interesting is seeing how monogamous couples that have been monogamous for the longest time is like suddenly they realize, hey, how about this? How about if we just start doing other things and open a little bit our relationship, sometimes together as a couple, and sometimes separate, right? And that's something very interesting and very difficult to do.
Yeah, and I think people don't fully explore, all the pros and cons before they enter into something like that, do they?
Absolutely. I think they explore. I think they really fantasize with the pros, right? I'm not sure that they really weigh, the cons, and yeah.
So, Christina, this has been a really fascinating conversation. If any audience members are interested in knowing more about you and reaching out, what's your best contact information?
So I work at Alliance Counseling. We are a group of multilingual therapists, psychologists, and counselors working in Singapore. And yeah, this is where we practice in Singapore, but also we do telehealth. So, we could also do, Zoom sessions, and people are more and more used to that after COVID, as you may know.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you so much for joining me today and talking about this, very, very, I suppose, in trend topic at the moment, in terms of having multiple partners and non-traditional type relationships going forward. Really found it very fascinating. Do you have any final words of wisdom to share with the audience before we sign off?
No, thank you very much. Just express my, my thankfulness for, for this conversation. Definitely very interesting. And yeah, fascinating trend. Let's see where it goes, right?
Yeah, we'll be watching and learning ourselves, won't we, as to what may or may not transpire going forward.
Yeah, exactly. You never know.
So it just leaves me to say, true love starts with opening our hearts. And until next time, goodbye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Hearts Entwined podcast. You can follow Lyn via the Facebook group Two Hearts Entwined, or search Lyn Smith, inspirational speaker, at LinkedIn, or email lyn@hearts-entwined.com. That's LYN@hearts-entwined.com. Remember, true love starts with opening our hearts.